Welcome back to Island's Horror World. My name is Island. Of course, you guys already know that. Welcome to the conclusion of the Friday the 13th review saga. For now, at least, you never know. You never know. The lawsuit could work out, and we could possibly get another Jason movie. Praying that happens. So we'll just cut straight to the chase. No rambling or anything. So we're on the final entry of the series. For now, again, the 2009 remake by Platinum Dunes. Oh joy. So Friday the 13th stars Jared Padalecki, Danielle Panabaker, Derek Mears as Jason, and is directed by Marcus Nispel. This is obviously the remake of the original and is one of the many horror remakes that came out in the 2000s. It's weird that they're still doing them nowadays. Yeah, this is like one of the last Platinum Dunes remakes that I've at least heard about. After this, we would get the Nightmare on Elm Street remake and so on. So yeah, it's one of those movies. Friday the 13th's plot, or somewhat lack thereof, goes like this. Clay Miller has traveled to the town of Crystal Lake looking for his sister Whitney, who has been missing for a number of weeks. When he arrives at the infamous Camp Crystal Lake, he comes across a group of college students staying out at the lake, and one of them decides to tag along to help him look for Whitney. Amidst an actual story, mixed with gratuitous nudity, of course, they all find themselves being targets of a far more terrifying Jason Voorhees than usual. Of course, this movie was one of many ideas conjured by Platinum Dunes. We all know who Platinum Dunes is. It's the terrifying production company that gave us so many horror remakes nearly 2 decades ago now. The 2000s was quite a scary time for the horror genre because we had remake after remake after remake. And they're the same people that gave us the god-awful 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Dear God. But hey, New Line Cinema and Paramount partnered up to make this movie, so that's something, I guess. So who would direct this infamous remake, even though they could have just done another sequel? Marcus Nispel, the one that gave us the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake I still haven't been able to see. Even though I've seen the prequel, and it's pretty good, I won't lie. Production of this movie was rather messy, with actors being casted at the very last minute, most kills being changed, the initial hesitation to cast Derek Mears as Jason, and the works. But at least Michael Bay helped with the production. That's a good joke. And we're going to do something new on this channel. Adela's Horror World Trivia Time! Did you know that Quentin Tarantino almost directed this movie? Or that Tommy Jarvis was originally meant to come back? Or even that some of the kills were accomplished with CGI, a la Lawrence's kill with a CGI axe. Oh, and the best part, Scout Taylor Compton almost played Jenna before Danielle Panabaker was given the role. So, what are my thoughts on this remake? It's actually not that bad. This movie isn't great, and it's not the best movie out there, but on rewatch about a year ago, I found myself having a pretty decent time with it. It's really not that bad, and it might be one of my least favorites of the series, but it's not as bad as some of the other ones I reviewed, trust me. So let's go ahead and get into my positives for the remake. First off, I really like the character of Clay Miller. I think Jared Padalecki gives a really good performance as an older brother trying to look for his younger sister, who goes missing in the opening scene. I would say spoiler alert, but the movie's been out for 15 years at this point. You should have seen it by now, especially if you're a Jason fan. But I think he gives a really good performance nonetheless. And you immediately like the guy, not just because he's the guy from Supernatural, a show I still haven't seen yet, but you sympathize with him. If you were an older brother or an older sister and your younger sibling went missing, you would go look for them too, if you had a decent relationship. But anyways, and you root for him, and you don't want Jason to kill him. You want him to beat Jason at the end. You're rooting for him to find Whitney. And surprisingly, the character development is pretty darn strong in this one. So I will give the remake that. It did something a little better than some of the previous films. Next, I also really like Jenna, Danielle Panabaker's character. She is the only one of the second friend group we get in this film out of the 2 we get. She's the only one that even tries to help Clay look for Whitney. She's the only one that seems to care, and she makes for a really good female protagonist, and there are a few moments where you think, just for a moment, they could become a romantic couple. But they don't actually explicitly tell you that, and I think it was for the best. It kind of reminds me of the newest movie we got, Twisters, with the two main characters. You think they're going to be a couple, and there's implications that they could become a couple, but they do not explicitly tell you. Sometimes implications are better than actually them telling us that they're a couple, and I think it worked for the film. Next, we all know about the opening 25 minutes of this movie. It's some of the best Friday the 13th stuff we have ever gotten in the entire franchise. We need more of this, please. The atmosphere of the campgrounds of Crystal Lake is really eerie. The kills, we'll get to some of the other kills later, but at least the kills in this opening, they're some of the scariest, man. They're some of the scariest, and there's actually a decent amount of suspense. And Jason in the baghead mask, I'd argue, is more terrifying than when he gets the hockey mask later. It's really all you need to know. It's an incredible opening, and it's probably my favorite opening scene in the entire franchise, besides part 6. Speaking of Jason, let's get into Derek Mears, the latest person to play Jason Voorhees. I think he's possibly the scariest Jason since Ted White. He's a survivalist. He's actually smarter than some of the other Jasons. He's very intelligent. Like, he knows when you're around, and he sets up traps of all kinds. While I don't think he's as iconic as Kane Hodder or as good as Ted White, because Ted White is personally my favorite Jason, rest in peace, I think of the 21st century at least, Derek Mears is the scariest Jason we've ever had. Initially, they hesitated to cast Derek Mears as Jason, which is rather strange, but I am very, very glad that they eventually decided to give in and was like, oh, what the heck, we'll let you play Jason. You wanna know why they hesitated to give him the role? Because he was a very nice guy in real life. Because the other actors that played Jason weren't nice, kind of weird. And finally, my final positive, while not every kill in this movie is spectacular, some of them are not just great. They are horrifying. Hence, the sleeping bag kill in the opening, which is a terrifying twist on the one in part 7 and in Jason X, which was, those were played for laughs. This one is played for scares, and it works. Lawrence's death is also really scary because not only does Jason kill him, he makes him suffer just long enough to use him as bait to try and lure everybody else out of the lake house. You've never seen Jason do that, and it's quite scary. And finally, Trent's death. Sort of a horrifying death, but it's mainly a death that makes me go, hooray! And we'll get to why later. So moving on to my mixed elements, I only have 3. First, I do think some parts of this movie drag just a little bit, and it can get a little boring at times. I'm specifically talking about the second act, mainly with Jenna and Clay wandering Crystal Lake, wandering through the woods, looking for clues, like it's Scooby-Doo. Like, I'm convinced that the characters in this movie are the Scooby Gang, or the Mystery Gang, whatever you want to call them. But some parts of this movie drag. It probably has to do with the fact that this movie is almost 2 hours long. The killer cut, at least. I have not seen a movie this long since Jason Takes Manhattan in the series. This is the longest of the whole series. You thought Jason Takes Manhattan was long? This movie is like 12, 13, 14 minutes longer, and it does kind of show at times. But luckily, by the third act, it picks back up and it becomes intense again for the most part, and we'll get to that. Next, besides Clay and Jenna, and two side characters that I'm about to get into, every other character in this movie is stereotypical. That's all I can really say. Chelsea, Nolan, Bree. Why would I care if Jason killed them? Like, they're just stereotypical. And Bree makes Trent even more of a douchebag, and we'll get to that later. But anyways, those characters, I really could not give a crap if they died. But on the positive side of that, Lawrence and Chewie are possibly my favorite side characters in all of Friday the 13th. Because they do the impossible. They entertain the audience. And finally, although I mentioned the kills earlier that are scary, the other kills, they're not really that creative, man. Like Richie's death, I'm not impressed. Wade's death, I'm not impressed. Mike's death, I'm not impressed. Especially Bree's death, I'm definitely not impressed. Some of the kills in this movie are really bland, which is surprising because Platinum Dunes was known for making horror remakes a lot more violent than the original. This is the one exception. Okay, like, if you've seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, I haven't, but I've seen some of the kills. They're gory as heck. In the beginning, they are even gorier. And in the Nightmare remake, I'll give it this. It was quite violent, especially the opening scene. It was really gory. This one, I don't really think it's as gory as some of those other movies, which is honestly a little disappointing because it's Friday the 13th and you are looking forward to seeing awesome, gory, bloody Jason kills. You only get a few of those in there. You only get those in there. Like, even Chewie's death, it's gory, but it's really not that creative of a kill. A screwdriver to the throat. Is that really all you're going to give us? Now we're moving on to my negatives. While he's not as bad as specific douchebags in the series a la Dr. Cruz, Charles from Part 8, I know he's supposed to be a prick, but Trent goes really overboard at times. He treats Clay like crap for no reason, right? Cheats on Jenna with Bree in an extended sex scene that we'll talk about later that I didn't really like. Not only because it went on way too long, but because he cheated on Jenna, a character I actually liked and was rooting for. No, he goes overboard. He is a prick the whole movie. And I'm pretty sure the only reason that they made him like that was so you could cheer when he dies. No, seriously. This guy is a walking red flag. If he came up to me and started hitting on me, I would run away faster than Part 9 Jason's shift ability in the video game. Next, speaking of Trent and Bree's sex scene, you thought Part 5 had an overabundance of nudity because the director used to be a porn director. That's nothing. You thought Jason Goes to Hell was a bit too much with that extended graphic sex scene in the tent, especially in the unrated version. That's nothing. This movie takes the cake. There isn't just one, but two graphic sex scenes with an overabundance of nudity that goes on. They go on for way too long, especially the one with Trent and Bree. Look, I know the gentlemen that watch my videos love their TNA, and I respect that, but sometimes it makes me really uncomfortable. There is a specific scene in at least the Killer Cut version. I'm not sure if this version of the scene is in the theatrical cut, but you have this redneck in this barn, right? We all know this character. Has a porn magazine and gets really weird with it, and it makes me uncomfortable. He's a pervert, and he bangs mannequins, apparently. I can't get through that without laughing, I'm sorry. Just really, he kind of deserved to get killed by Jason, but this movie is a bit too much. Like, nearly every female character you see in this movie has to get naked for some reason. Except for Whitney and Jenna, because they're the main female protagonists. So they can't get naked, because if they did, they would die. Even though one of them dies eventually anyway, which we'll get into. Next, the third act is all over the place in this movie. It's one of the weaker third acts of the series, to be honest. It's no Part 3 or Part 2 or Part 4 or even Part 5, even though Pam was screaming constantly. Or definitely not a Part 7. I think this third act goes on for way too long and has too many endings. It's a mess. Let's run it down for you. Let's run down the entire third act for you. Spoiler alert if you have not seen the remake, even though you definitely should have at this point. This movie has been out for a decade and a half. You should have seen it. But anyways, spoiler alert. Do not get mad at me for spoiling the third act for you. Anyways, here we go. So first off, Clay and Jenna help rescue Whitney in Jason's lair, even though she does escape before that in the killer cut, but Jason found her and kidnapped her again in the middle of that ridiculous freaking sex scene, and then they try running from Jason. Jenna gets a surprise death, then Jason knocks Clay out, and then chases Whitney and a later conscious Clay to the barn where that stupid pervert redneck was, and then they fight. Then Whitney tricks Jason into believing she's his mother because that hasn't been done before. Then he's hanged by a chain and then gets his head eaten up by a wood chipper. And then we get the worst line in the entire series.
Jason! Say hi to Mommy! In hell!
Then his body is dumped in the lake, but surprise! He's actually not dead. Okay. I guess. And finally, I don't think Whitney is a very good final girl. The actress, her name slips me. I'll put it up here. She does as best as she can, but I honestly think Jenna would have been the better final girl, and I kind of wish she didn't get killed in the third act. What they could have done was have Jenna and Clay rescue Whitney, and they go to escape, but Whitney gets killed anyway. That's what they could have done. They didn't really do that, though. All Whitney really does in this movie is scream, cry, and act scared. Granted, the actress does give a decent performance, but that's really all she does. And it gets kind of annoying sometimes. And this is the best part. She's used as Jason's pawn for the whole movie because she just so happens to look like Pamela Voorhees before she started going on that killing spree in 1980 in the opening scene. Because, how convenient for your plot. Oh, and also, since when does Jason kidnap people? Very confusing. He has never kidnapped people before. And I know they did the whole mommy sweater thing in part 2, but Jason only fell for that for a moment. In this movie, he falls for it for apparently 6 weeks. And how on earth did Whitney survive? 6 weeks. What did he feed her? Did she have water? It makes no sense. It's kind of stupid. It's a plot hole. So overall, guys, I think the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th is a decent movie. It is one of my least favorites of the series, but I can find some enjoyment out of it. I think it's a fun time. I used to hate this movie, and I used to say it was one of the absolute worst of the series. I used to think it was terrible. Not so much now. I actually have a bit of enjoyment from it. You can tell it's a Friday the 13th remake. This is one of the only films by Platinum Dunes that they actually put some amount of effort into. It was Marcus Nispel who made this one, and apparently the 2003 remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a very good movie. I should check that out sometime. And then maybe I could review that series. But it is bogged down by some stereotypical characters, a really, really annoying character that I really just don't like. Sorry, something like that. And there's just too much nudity, too many sex scenes in there. For me personally, if you guys enjoy that, perfectly fine. I personally just didn't. But, we do get some really good character development from Clay. We get an awesome Jason and Derek Mears, who I might meet this year, by the way. And a creepy atmosphere that screams Friday the 13th, as well as some very phenomenal kills, while some could be bland. If you've never seen this movie before, because you've been living under a rock for all these years, if you're a fan of Jason and you haven't even seen the remake, I will recommend it. I will. I do think this movie is decent. If you don't like it, that's perfectly fine. Or if you're just new to horror and you want to watch a fun slasher flick with a pretty tense atmosphere, a great Jason, and some pretty darn good kills, yeah, this movie's for you. I'm going to give Friday the 13th a C. So what do you guys think of the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th? Let me know in the comments below. Do you like this movie? Do you love this movie? Do you hate this movie, or are you in the middle on it? This movie seems to also be all over the place with fans. But let me know in the comments below, and we can debate about it in the replies. So, be looking forward to my next series review, or I guess my next trilogy review. I'm going to be going over the X trilogy from X all the way to Maxine, which I saw last month. Be looking forward to that, starting with X next Sunday. And be looking forward to any future videos on this channel. If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button, click the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you'll get notifications for all future uploads and videos on this channel. But if you don't want to like this video, if you don't want to subscribe, that is perfectly fine as well. So anyways, guys, I guess that's pretty much it. So anyways, I'm Madeline. This is Adeline's Horror World. Of course, you guys already know that. I love all you guys to death. And until next time,